On the inside, looking out. Students at one of 2 halls of residence at Manchester Metropolitan University, now quarantined for 14 days, symptoms or no symptoms, after more than 100 COVID cases.
So this is one of our bedrooms, both the same size. Got a bed, desk, wardrobe.
Max's world has shrunk to his student flat and a patch of grass.
And down there's the courtyard and smoking area, which is where we're supposed to get our exercise in. And
we have been speaking to other flats, and everyone's describing it as a prison. So we have to remain in our room flat for 14 days, but we're allowed to go outside and smoke with other flats, which doesn't really, we're not too sure, but we're not allowed to exercise. We can't go for walks. We can't go to the shop.
It's the same. So our washing machine and those facilities are beyond the gate. So as far as we're aware, we're not sure when we can or if we can go and do some washing, or it's the same with deliveries.
Yeah.
We're not sure
where we pick them up, how that works.
Because we're not allowed beyond the gate.
Do you feel that it's reasonable, it's protecting others, it's protecting you, or do you feel that you're in some way being punished?
So to an extent, we completely understand, but so last week we were given a lockdown which lasted for, was it like a day?
It was a day.
And a lot of flats have already completed 10 days isolating, within their flat, and some of them are due out in a few days. And now there's an additional 2 weeks. So for some people, they've potentially not been outside properly for,
up to a month. It will be a month.
Glasgow University, where hundreds are self-isolating, has announced it's refunding all students in halls 1 month's rent and giving them £50 towards food. The Union for Academics is warning universities risk becoming incubators for COVID. Some students are scared they might not be allowed to go home for Christmas. Boris Johnson once assured us things would be back to normal by then. But this weekend, millions of people are going back into a kind of lockdown light. From today, people in Leeds, Blackpool, Wigan and Stockport can't mix with anyone who's not in their household or bubble, at home or in the garden. From 6 this evening, similar restrictions apply in Llanelli in South Wales, where people also can't go in or out of the area without a reasonable excuse. The same rules come in Cardiff and Swansea tomorrow evening, and extended households or bubbles won't be allowed in restricted areas either. Infections continue to multiply. In New York, the Prime Minister told the United Nations the UK will be the world's protector.
Epidemiologists at Oxford University identified the first treatment for COVID-19. They did trials with our National Health Service and found that a cheap medicine called dexamethasone reduces the risk of death by over a third for patients on ventilators.
But back home, his government's scrambling to fix an embarrassing problem with the just-launched COVID-19 app.
It's time for you to play a starring role.
We can't do this alone.
Get the app on your phone.
It's emerged tens of thousands of COVID test results can't be read by the NHS app. Negative tests and, more seriously, some positive ones. The government says it's urgently working to fix things.
Well, Jane joins us now from the newsroom. Jane, can you tell us a little bit more about the problems people say they're having with this app?
Yes, this app for England and Wales was meant to be the defining moment in our fight to contain the virus. But there are 2 big problems. Let me explain. It's a little bit complicated. If you booked your test through the app, then you would have been sent to one of these outsourced testing centres. And should you test positive, the app automatically knows, it automatically updates and can go about the business of contacting your contacts to tell them there's a problem. But if you downloaded the app having already booked a test previously, perhaps in an NHS hospital, the NHS hospital positive test result doesn't sync with the NHS app. So that's clearly an issue. Also, if you test negative, the app can't recognise that. It asks for a code, which you don't get if you get a negative test result. So it thinks you've still got symptoms, it thinks you should still self-isolate, and continues to tell you to self-isolate with a countdown clock. And there's no way of overriding that, which is clearly frustrating and confusing for a lot of people. I should say, in Wales, they say they don't have an issue with the codes syncing with the app, But in Westminster, the government here is saying that it is working urgently to update the app for English users.
Thanks, Jane. Now joining me live from Geneva is Dr. David Nabarro, who's the WHO Special Envoy on COVID and a director at Imperial College's Institute of Global Health Innovation. Dr. Nabarro, thanks very much for talking to us today. In his speech to the United Nations today, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson said humanity was caught napping and with agonising slowness we're making progress. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yes, it is slow, Jackie, and just to give a couple of statistics, we are still seeing the numbers of cases really high. We're nearly reaching 1 million recorded deaths due to COVID, and the extent of our collective response is just not quick enough. So I was very glad to see that Mr. Johnson said today that Britain is going to work with other countries for a unified response.
And I mean, how likely is that unified response, do you think?
Well, if we look around the world, scientists are working together better than I've ever seen it. Governments are mostly working together and really trying to find ways to get ahead of the virus. It's a few governments who are holding out and saying, no, we don't want to be part of the consensus. I think the majority of people everywhere realize that the virus is here to stay and that it's affecting everybody and that there are no big surprises. If we look around the world, the same phenomenon is happening everywhere. So I actually think that the world will come together, and I hope that the countries that are not part of the global effort to deal with the problem will soon come along and join the rest of them.
Very interestingly, the Director General of the WHO said last week that when we do get an effective vaccine, we must use it effectively. And he said that that should start by vaccinating some people in all countries rather than all people to ensure global economic recovery. Doesn't that also ensure that we'd have to accept some people will be left without the vaccine and may die?
Well, I think that the absolute need is to prioritise people when the vaccine does arrive. I want to stress, of course, that we don't have a vaccine yet, so we've got to find ways to live with the virus in the interim. But when we get the vaccine, I would really prefer to see the people who are most at risk being vaccinated first, and then the rest will follow. I don't think anyone's saying that there will be no vaccine for those who are at lower risk. We're just saying put the ones who are most likely to get ill, and particularly the ones who are most at risk of extreme suffering and death, at the front of the queue, wherever they live.
Now, if you look at where the UK is now, we have around a quarter of the population in these local lockdowns, and those poor students trapped in their halls, unable to go out. I mean, is that the right approach?
Well, others have asked me, what's the future going to look like? First of all, it's going to be a lot influenced by how we all behave, and the need to maintain physical distancing, to wear masks, to be practicing hygiene, and to stay out of the way if we're feeling unwell is absolutely central for everybody. And we have to do it even when the numbers of cases are rather small. Secondly, of course, we want the government and other institutions to make sure that testing is available and contact tracing works. And I know that all countries are struggling to get the essential pieces in place. Only occasionally will it be necessary to do lockdowns when we get ourselves organised. The present is, I think, a temporary situation while we are working out how to deal with this continuing problem.
Just very briefly, if you would, I mean, is it fair for people to be disappointed that we now know that there are problems with this test and trace app in England after months and months of time to prepare for this? I mean, is it right for people to think this hasn't gone well?
All I'm going to say is that I'm really pleased that there's a real effort to upgrade test and trace in the UK. And in my understanding, there are often teething problems with new software. And that's, I think, the most I can say, because I don't know the full details.
Dr. Nabarro, thank you so much for talking to us.